G'day, I'm Mike Hayes and welcome to Jazz Guitar Chord-melody Part 42. You know, it's very satisfying when you've been working on a chord-melody arrangement and it finally starts to come together. It's like you've been working on this giant jigsaw puzzle and you finally found that one missing piece, that one special chord that makes your whole arrangement work. I'd like to share with you some new ideas today and some new sounds that I hope will help you develop your own chord melody arrangement style on guitar. But before we get started, just a quick reminder to subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on any of the good stuff. Okay, let's get cracking. In today's session, we will be creating a whole series of interesting and modern sounding chords. And we'll be doing this by making one simple change to the way we think about the possibilities of chords that can be created from this scale. To begin with, let's play through the chord shapes that I'll be basing today's session on. We'll be playing through the C major 6th diminished scale, and I'll be playing the chord sequence through twice. Here we go. To create our new harmonies, we're going to begin with the C6th chord. However, instead of playing the A note in the C6th chord, we're going to move that A up to the note B, which of course would be the next scale note in the C6th diminished scale. When we move this A note up to B, that produces a C major 7th chord. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's nothing new, Mike, I already do that. But stick with me because we're going to take this process right through the whole scale, and I can assure you there'll be some surprises along the way. Now the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to play the original chord from the C6th diminished scale. In this instance, it'll be the C6th chord. I'm going to hold that chord for 4 beats, and then I'm going to play the new chord. In this instance, the C major 7th chord. Again, holding it for 4 beats. And I'll play that through twice. Have a listen to the feeling that is created when we move from one chord to the next. Now, some of the changes as we go through the scale will be very subtle, and you'll have to listen really closely, and in other instances the harmonies that are created will be very obvious when the chord changes. Here we go. C sixth to C major 7. Can you hear the difference? What we're listening for is a different feeling or a different flavour, and we want to remember the feeling or the flavour that is created when we're moving from the C6 to C major 7, because later on that will help us quickly find the sounds that we're looking for our arrangement. We'll remember the sound or the feeling and where that comes from on the guitar. So this is a very important exercise, and I would recommend going over this very slowly and review it often. Now it's time to move on to the second chord in the C major 6 diminished scale. And that would be D diminished. Keep in mind that there's only one diminished chord, and all that's happening is that there's different inversions of this chord throughout the scale. I'll be naming the diminished chord by the lowest note in the chord. So to find our new chord that we're going to create, I'm simply going to move the B note in the D diminished chord. I'm going to move it up to the next scale note, and that would be the note C. And what this does, it produces a D minor 7 flat 5 chord. So let's have a listen to that. We're going to listen to D diminished, held for 4 beats, and then moving to D minor 7 flat 5. And remember, I'm going to play this sequence through twice. Here we go. Can you hear the difference? There's a subtle difference as the chords move from a fully diminished, a diminished 7th chord, to a half diminished, the minor 7 flat 5. Right then, onwards and upwards, onto the third chord in the major 6 diminished scale, and we have another inversion of C6. When we move the C note in the C6th up to the next scale tone note, we move it up to the note D, the chord that's produced is E minor 11. Let's have a listen to these two chords. Can you spot the difference? Again, it's a subtle change. Now when we move on to the next chord, which is an F diminished chord, what we're going to do there is move the note D up to the next scale tone note, which would be E. And what that does, it creates a new chord which is called an F diminished major 7. Yes, you heard that correctly, an F diminished major 7. And of course, you could name this chord many other ways. You could think of it as an E triad with an F bass. You could think of it as a G13 flat 9. However, in this harmonic environment, we're going to name it F. Let's have a listen to how it sounds changing from the F diminished chord to the F diminished major 7th chord. as you can hear, the diminished major 7th chord produces a very dissonant sound. And that's because it contains the dissonant intervals of the tritone as well as the major 7th. And this is a very interesting and useful chord in jazz. I'll give you an example where the diminished major 7th chord resolves to the major 7th chord. So in this instance, we're moving from an F diminished major 7th to an F major 7. Let's have a listen. And while we're at it, let's have a listen to another application of this new chord that we've just learnt. In this example, I'm going to use it as a transition chord away from the major 7th chord. Let's say we had a bar of F major 7th, then a bar of F dominant 7th, going to B flat major. I could play F major 7th, F diminished major 7th, C minor 11, B7 flat 5 to B flat major 9th. We've just made the chords a little bit more fancy, and we've created some additional movement, but most importantly, we've added some drama. Here's how that would sound. As you can see, there's a lot of possibilities available to the creative guitarist once you really have a look at what's going on in each of these chords. Now at this point, we're halfway through the process of rethinking about an optional way that we can reharmonize the major 6th diminished scale. And since there's a lot of information, I've decided to split this part of the course up into 2 sessions. But before we finish, I'd like to give you another example of the type of way that we could think about this material that we're studying. I mentioned earlier that the F diminished major 7th chord could also be thought of as a G13 flat 9. Let's suppose for a minute we think about this chord in that way. Let's take a 2-5-1 in the key of C, which would be D minor 7, G7, C major. And now let's use our new chord, the G13 flat 9, to create extra tension before resolving to the C major. So here's one way that we could think about that 2-5-1 in C. We could play D minor 11, G13 flat 9, resolving to C 6-9. Let's have a listen to that. Can you hear how effective that chord can be in that type of situation? Let's say we wanted to experiment a little bit more with that type of chordal texture. We know that that chord also could be called an F diminished major 7th. And therefore, because it has that diminished quality, we could move that chord shape up or down the fingerboard at a distance of 3 frets in the same way that we would with a diminished 7th chord. Here's one more example of that 2-5-1. I'm going to play D minor 11, and then I'm going to play G13 flat 9 for 2 beats, and then move it up the fingerboard 3 frets higher, and I'll be playing the same chord. And then I'm going to resolve to a C 6-9. Let's have a listen to that. Okay, that's it for this session, folks. The point I'm really trying to make is that if we just practice playing up and down the scale, with these type of chords, they quite often won't make much sense. There's a number of chords that we'll be creating with this process that will be quite dissonant. Therefore, we need to know the application of these chords in our music and not just play them as part of a scale practice routine. I think of these dissonant chords as being very effective resources to help us bring out the flavour in our music. Very much in the same way that a chef would use a lemon to bring out the flavour in his or her cooking. And so I hope there's something in this session that will help you with your music and your guitar playing. Don't forget, if you have any questions or comments, to pop them in the comments section below the video. And as always, I look forward to catching up with you next time. Bye for now.